Workshops with Patio Gardens, Victoria. Moss Wreath Making Workshop.
Hi everyone, I'm Dee from Patio Gardens, and today I'm here to teach you a Christmas wreath using a wire form and moss. So let's just get started because 'tis the season. It's just time to go. So what we do is we have wire forms come in many different sizes. The one that I'm going to use today is a 16-inch wreath form. We're going to place it. It has a flat side and it has a rounded side. We're going to place the rounded side face down on the table, and we're going to use moss. And so if you're going to use moss in a wreath, of course, then you need to go collect some moss, or hopefully your local garden center can supply you with some like Patio Gardens does. So we're going to place the green side down, and we're going to push it in to the wreath form, because keeping in mind that the brown side will be the side that is facing the back of the wall. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill that ring with the moss so that it's quite tight, and this really just only takes a couple of minutes. This is lovely moss. And then press it so that you kind of don't feel the ring, so that it's filled up enough, because all of your greens that you're going to use for your wreath are picked into that moss. So you want to make sure that it's filled up enough that it's going to hold all those greens, not break apart. So I would hum to you, but you don't want to hear that. All right, so here we have the wreath filled. And now we're going to use something called paddle wire. And paddle wire is a 24 gauge wire that is green. It's a green florist wire like this. And this is perfect for what we're doing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use the end of this as a needle, and we're going to find a piece of that wire anywhere. It can be on the outside, the inside, and we're going to put that wire and twist it to get it on there. And then approximately every 2 inches, we're going to wrap the paddle wire and just give it a light pull, and wrap it and give it a light pull. So approximately every 2 inches, all the way around the wreath form. Keep wrapping and wrapping and wrapping. And you're going to be happy that you did it every 2 inches, because it's going to give you a wire to slip your greens under when it comes time to using all your fresh greens. And once you've kind of gone all the way around, we'll cut it off, and again we'll leave a little bit of what we call a tail as a needle to find another area on the wire form to finish it off. But you have to make sure you've gone all the way around, and you can pretty much tell, you can see where I've wrapped the wire, where it's held the moss in place, and where I haven't, where it's kind of open still. Okay, I think I'm just about ready to finish it off here. So I'm going to leave about a 12-inch tail, cut the wire, use it as a needle, find another piece of the wire frame, and finish it off around there several times so that we know it's going to stay together. So just go back and forth, in and out around that wire form. And that's your mossing. So when I turn it to show you, you'll see that you can barely tell now which is the rounded side and which is the flat side. It's quite pretty just like that. So that is your moss. And now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about greens. We're very fortunate here because greens are readily available to us. Often we can have a windstorm and go outside and pick up branches and use them. But if you're in an area where you don't have a lot of greens to pick from, you have to hit up your neighbors. Or you can go to your local garden center probably and get bundles of greens like we have at Patio Gardens to help you through the process. So we talk about fillers, spillers, and thrillers often when we do design work. These are what we would call the fillers. This is our cedar. It's flat backed as well. So everything kind of goes onto the wreath and it's flat. And then everything on top of that is built up to create your wreath design. And then we go from the fillers and spillers to the thrillers, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So when you're using your greens, you want to make sure that you're cutting and using every piece of this so we're not wasting it. So we often talk in design about we cut at the armpit of the branch on an angle so that we have a point, and we always pick off the bottom 2 or 3 inches. And that's so that when we go to place it into our wreath, we find the wires that we have wrapped and we slide it into there, like so. So that's the first piece. Also, it's a big surprise to people when we're greening is that we use less greens than you think you're going to. So again, you cut on an angle, strip off 2 to 3 inches, find one of the wires and place it on. And you'll notice that I'm placing it sort of in the middle, because if you're placing it off to the side, it's going to make your wreath larger. So you're in control about how big you want this design. So let's just carry on with putting the cedar in. One piece at a time, and it just overlaps, and I am doing it all in one direction. And we never waste any of the stem. So by going down into that little, what we call the armpit of the stem and cutting it on an angle, we can use every little piece of that branch. Within reason, of course. You see how it's coming? So we're just overlapping, and we're just going to create that base all the way around. Approximately 6 inch piece, 6 to 8 inch piece. And turn your wreath as you work. And just enjoy the process. It's lovely. Smelling the greens as you're working. And also, if you do have any sensitivities at all to any of the Christmas greens, it will likely be the cedar. So with this process, of course, you might want to wear some garden gloves so that you don't have those sensitivities. Also keeping in mind that everything we build up over top of this will hold this down in place a little bit more as well. So if you have a little wild piece here and there, it doesn't matter. It's going to be held down. And we can always come back with more of our greens at the end if we need to fill in with any more cedar. But we always start with the base of this first. I'm trying to inspire you all to make your own Christmas wreath this year. Sometimes it helps too, prior to the process, is to cut all of your greens in your pieces. So you could take your branch and cut it all down. And make a pile of your pieces, all approximately the same size, and then you can just go ahead and put your wreath together. Find some cutters that work really well. Yeah, and see how that's just those 3 pieces are just pretty quick to put in that way. Just about there. Put a few more pieces in so that I'm not seeing all of that moss, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Also, you're in control of putting in all of these greens, so you're also in control of how much you want to put. Do you want a really bushy wreath? Then just add more layers of it. Again, I think you'll be quite surprised how little greens you actually need to create your wreath. So there we go. It's looking good already. So that was less than 1 branch. However, I am going to save my branch here so that we can fill in with a little bit more later. So that's the cedar, done with that. And now we're going to go with the fir branches. And then into the pine, which speaks volumes about Christmas, doesn't it? I love pine. So now we're going to take our branch of fir and do exactly the same thing. We're going to cut it on a little angle, strip off the needles so that we have a pick. And on top, and so this is where I really look at my piece and I go, okay, well there's a little area right here that needs to be filled in. So this is where I'm going to start with my fir. It smells fabulous. And I'm going to place the fir in. So I'll just continue to do that all the way around. It's already really starting to come together here. And if you just keep it all in the middle going around, nature will take care of how it looks, but you won't close in your wreath. If you put it too close to the inside, you won't close in this area here. We stopped filming for a minute so that I could complete the wreath and you didn't have to watch me do the whole process. But I just wanted you to see what's happening here with this little bit of fir, which is only our 2nd layer. And do you see how nice and fluffy and the textures are coming? And so one thing I wanted to mention too is don't hesitate here and there to turn your foliages over so that you get a little bit of a different color. I wouldn't want to do an entire wreath that way, but little pops of different colors and textures are beautiful in your design. So don't hesitate to do that. And then at any time, if you hold your wreath up and you go, you know what, keeping in mind again that everything we put on top here is still going to hold it down. But if there's anything that is bothering you, that's what these are for. So you can just go ahead and clip it down a bit wherever you need. So don't hesitate to do that as well. So now we're going to go into our 3rd layer, which is my favorite Christmas green of all, other than the pitch that gets on your hands, is the pine. So I like to put a few pieces of pine in, and there's many different types of pine, of course. But again, what you're going to do is use every scrap of it. So you're going to cut off your piece, take off the bottom needles, have your pick, just like we've done everything else. And then you're going to find some key areas where you want to put this. And you see what happens, and it just smells fabulous. But this is now really starting to come together. Strip off your needles and pick it in. And if you only have one little branch to work with, because that's all you were able to round up, then really spread it around. And when you're designing, we always like to say that we like to design in odd numbers. So go with maybe 3 pieces or 5 pieces or 7 pieces, and that will just look beautiful to the eye. However, rules are always meant to be broken when you're working with Christmas greens. So just keep poking it in, cutting your pieces. So I like to start with just a few going around, and then I'll go around again and fill in a little bit more. So these are all the fillers for your Christmas wreath. And really make sure that they're in there because it has to be able to withstand winds so it doesn't come apart. Okay, so now we're going to work into our thrillers. Spillers, actually. Let's talk about our spillers. Spillers are things that are beautiful. They're not the greens, but maybe a little extra of something. Today we're going to use seeded eucalyptus, which is this beautiful blue-green color. Again, adds a whole different texture to your design. And we're going to add some huckleberry sticks. So it's a red huck stick, beautiful to use, very West Coast looking. And then our thrillers are things like our berries that we want to see on top. So we don't want to bury them all down into the greens. And cones and maybe holly. This beautiful variegated holly is lovely because again, it just adds a different color. And if you wanted to use ornaments and bows, that's all your thrillers. So you want to put that on last so that you see them. So we'll go into our seeded eucalyptus here. And once again, this is where you need to decide how big or how small you want to keep these greens, because you can actually do an all over. Can you see this wreath in here, Laura? In the frame? You can do a design that is just off to the top and off to the bottom on the side, or you can do an all over design. It's up to you. This is where you have to get a little bit creative, and I know you got it in you, so I hope I can bring it out. We're going to do an all over Christmas wreath design here. So I'm going to break these down a little bit smaller than I would if I was going to do something off to the top and off to the bottom. So once again, you don't want to lose any of this because this is much more expensive to purchase as well. So we're going to break it up in little pieces. And this is where it's just starting to look gorgeous. The trend right now too, of course, is a lot of green. People are loving the green foliages. Very natural looking. And we do it the same way we've done everything else, where we're actually cutting a piece of stem, taking off anything off the bottom of that stem. It's hard sometimes when it's such beautiful foliages. Having a pick and finding a wire and a place to put it in. Always be turning your wreath, and don't hesitate to always be looking at it to see how that design is coming. I think it's coming beautifully here. I'm going to put a little bit more of this in because I have it here and it's just really pretty. But it still is just one stem that I'm using of seeded eucalyptus, and you can see how much more I have. So it really does go a long way. Okay, and then we'll go into our huckleberry stems. And this is where we can really have some fun too, because it can really branch out the design. That's kind of funny, branch out. Anyways, and you do it exactly the same way. You have a pick and push it in. And again, this is what really starts holding down your design. So if it's really fluffy and there's pieces everywhere, the branch will start holding everything in place. Keeping in mind, I'm doing this very, very quickly to show you how it's done. So yours will probably be much more beautiful than mine. But let yourself go and do it. Don't think about it too much, because that's when you sometimes will just kind of say, you know, I don't know where to put it. Just do it. Just put it, and I promise you, again, you're working with nature. There's just nothing that isn't pretty in nature. And a lot of people ask, do I have to put it all the same way? And no, you don't. Often what happens when I teach a class and I have 25 people in my class, and at the end, and we've all used the same materials, there'll be 25 different designs, and it always amazes me because I just can't believe how different everyone's will look. So I'll say to my students, it will take on your personality. So be very careful what you want to tell us. So it's one of those things where you can do, it will take on your personality, I promise you. So there is some huckleberry branches. I like to use every piece of what I've got of this. I just love how it looks in design. So that was 2 stems. And this is when I kind of look at things and say, how is this going to hang? Is that going to be better this way, or is it going to be better this way? Because the design is now starting to take place. Thrillers is the best part. So with this particular one, we're going to use ilex berries here, because this is what we have. And you can see it's 2 different stems. So really the only option we have is to either use it in 2 places as full stems, cut down, sort of this way, or we break up these stems with all the small pieces and we put it all the way around. And because I'm going to do an overall design today, that's what I'm going to do. Sadly though, you do lose a little bit of the berries by doing this. So we'll find our spot and we'll place these around. So you have to strip off some of those bottom berries to have a pick to feed in. I like a little touch of berry just peeking out. The red is very Christmassy. And traditionally when I see the wreaths that we make and put out in the garden center, often it's the ones with a little bit of berries that will sell, because people do love that little bit of red still. Can you see how it's coming here? Just starting to look a little bit like Christmas. So that was one of our stems. So we did quite well with distributing the stems. And now I'm going to break up this one and use it as well. So this is where you have to decide where you want to stop. Do you want to now add some cones? We are lucky enough to, at Patio Gardens, to have these cones for sale, these pine cones. They're frosted tips, so they show really well on your wreath, and they're picked already, so it makes it wonderful to stick into your wreath. I still will find sometimes I will cut it down, and then again, I'm going to design 3s is enough. So I'm going to do in thirds. I'm going to find an area where I want to pick this cone in. And then so in like I said, thirds is the best way to do it because you may want a bow here. Then we have 3 pieces of holly. This is where you can get so carried away with your design. So I'm going to place those between the cones for a different element and a different texture. And I'm doing this up in the air, so I'm hoping that it looks good to you. And the secret is just to try to make sure that everything gets put in there really well so that it stays in place. Those are all the elements of our wreath. This one pine cone is giving me a bit of trouble. I'll fix it. There we go. Take a little stand back. I don't have a lot of room here, and decide if there's any changes that I need to make or if it's perfect the way it is, which I think is perfect the way it is. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the last thing that we're going to add to it, which is a bow. Now again, this is a very personal thing. I have found in my teaching and my classes that there's half the class that want it and half the class that don't want it. It does speak of Christmas, so I'm going to add one. This could be a whole class on its own, how to make a bow. This very, very simplest bow that I can tell you to make for this video is just to take approximately 2 meters of ribbon and cut it in half. This is absolutely the easiest. Always angle cut your tails. It just looks more professional that way. And you're just going to take it back on itself to make a loop and bring it forward on itself to make a loop. This is just like a classic shoelace style bow. So just like this, and then pinch pleat it, gather it all up from the bottom to the top so that you have 2 loops. This is a very simple bow. You're going to take your paddle wire and you're going to cut off some of your wire, approximately 12 inches. Leave a tail, put it down in front of your bow, and take the other tail and wrap it around. Pulling it tight at the back, taking your 2 wires and twisting the bow. You'll get a tighter twist if you twist the bow and not the wire. So that is a simple little bow like this. If you want a bigger bow and a more full bow, then take your other piece and make a bigger loop on either side with maybe a smaller tail. So you take it back on itself and forward on itself so that you have a little bit bigger loops or a little bit smaller loop depending on the style of bow that you want to have. And then again, you gather it all up in the center, take your wire, approximately 12 inches, leave a tail, approximately 6 inches, put it down in front, wrap the wire around the middle of the bow, give it a little pull, get it, do that about 2 or 3 times again, take the 2 tails, bring them to the back, twist the bow. So you're twisting the bow, and then you can take that bow and that bow on top of each other. Hi everybody, we had a little filming glitch, so now we were to the point where we put the one bow on top of the other bow, and then we took all 4 of the wires that were on the back and we twisted them together. So this is where you have to really look at your design and you have to decide, do you want it at your bow at the bottom, at the side, at the top of your wreath? It's a very personal thing again, but I kind of tend to be a bit sideways all the time, so I'm going to put it off to the side here. I'm going to take these wires and I'm going to find a stem that will wrap. I can wrap it around and around and around and around and kind of push it into the center. So we've completed our beautiful Christmas wreath together, and I just want to take a moment and say that I hope I've inspired you to create your own wreath, and maybe we'll see you at Patio Gardens. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, everyone.